When did a prank on a teacher go too far? Mrs. Osborne immediately locked the classroom door and screamed, "Which one of you thought it was funny to prank call my mother last night?" A couple of boys in the back snickered nervously, but nobody raised their hand. Eden and Alex were always pulling stupid pranks, so everyone assumed it was them, but they shook their heads when people looked their way. Whoever did it scared her so badly that she had a heart attack. My mother died last night because one of you thought it would be hilarious to call and threaten her. The room went completely silent. Even the kids who never paid attention were staring at Mrs. Osborne in shock. Someone's backpack fell off their desk and the thud made everyone jump. Nobody is leaving this room until I find out who did it. The police are waiting outside to arrest whoever is responsible. Danica raised her hand tentatively and asked if we could call our parents. Mrs. Osborne shook her head and said, "Not until someone confessed." She pulled her chair in front of the door and sat down with her arms crossed. Her phone kept buzzing, but she ignored it. The next 20 minutes felt like hours. Students started whispering to each other, trying to figure out who could have done it. Everyone had Mrs. Osborne's number from the class contact sheet she'd handed out at the beginning of the year. Any of us could have found her mom's information online. Kenny suggested it might have been someone from another period, but Mrs. Osborne said the caller mentioned specific things from our class, details only someone in the first period would know. She'd narrowed it down to us 30 students and wouldn't stop until she had a name. The accusations started flying. People pointed fingers at the usual suspects like Eden and Alex. Then someone mentioned that Alexis had been mad about her grade on the last essay. Ian said he'd overheard Lawrence joking about prank calling teachers. Everyone was turning on each other trying to deflect suspicion. Mrs. Osborne just sat there watching us with those red-rimmed eyes. Every few minutes she'd remind us that her mother was dead because of someone in this room. The weight of it pressed down on all of us. Some girls were crying. A few guys looked ready to bolt for the windows. I noticed Philip in the corner wiping his face with his sleeve. He was the quiet kid who sat alone and never caused trouble. While everyone else was arguing and defending themselves, he was silently crying. Something about his reaction seemed different from the general panic in the room. The room was getting hot with all of us trapped inside. Someone banged on the door from the outside, but Mrs. Osborne didn't move. We could hear muffled voices that sounded like administrators trying to get in. She'd barricaded us in here and wasn't budging until she got her answer. An hour passed, then two. We'd missed second period completely and third was starting. Parents were probably being called. The police were supposedly waiting. Everything was spiraling out of control because of one stupid prank call that had gone horribly wrong. Riley started having a panic attack and begged to go to the nurse. Mrs. Osborne wouldn't let her leave. Marco tried to reason with her, explaining this was kidnapping or false imprisonment. She laughed bitterly and said the police could arrest her after they arrested her mother's killer. That's when I noticed Philip had moved to the back of the room. He was sitting on the floor behind the last row of desks with his knees pulled to his chest. His whole body was shaking while everyone else was scared of getting in trouble. He looked absolutely terrified. I made my way over to him, stepping around backpacks and angry classmates. When I sat down next to him, he flinched like I might hit him. Up close, I could see his face was blotchy from crying and his breathing was ragged. "Philip, are you okay?" He shook his head and fresh tears started falling. His voice was barely a whisper when he finally spoke. The words came out in a rush, like he'd been holding them in for hours. It was me. I was dared to do it. Eden said I was too much of a prank call a teacher. He gave me $20 and said I had to make it scary or it didn't count. I didn't mean for anyone to get hurt. I just wanted them to think I was cool for once. "Please don't let me go to jail." "I can't go to jail. I'm only 15. Mrs. Osborne went white. She stood up and started slowly marching over to Philip. Her footsteps echoed across the silent classroom as she crossed the room in 5 quick strides. Philip tried to scramble backwards but hit the wall behind him. She grabbed his shoulders with both hands and her fingers dug into his shirt. Her whole body was shaking as she stared down at him. Everyone in the class froze completely. Nobody moved or even breathed. Philip's eyes were huge and wet with tears as he looked up at her face. Her mouth opened and closed like she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. The veins in her neck stood out and her face had gone from white to red. I pushed myself up from the floor and took 3 steps toward them. My hand reached out and touched her arm. Her sleeve was damp with sweat and I could feel her muscles tight under the fabric. She turned her head to look at me and her eyes weren't the eyes of a teacher anymore. They were just sad and broken and lost. For just a second, she looked like any other daughter who had lost her mom. Her grip on Philip loosened slightly. The door exploded open with a loud crack. 3 administrators rushed in with 2 security guards right behind them. They took in the scene in about half a second. Mrs. Osborne standing over Philip with her hands on him and me touching her arm trying to pull her back. The security guards moved fast. One grabbed Mrs. Osborne's wrists and pulled them off Philip's shoulders while the other stepped between them. She started screaming as they pulled her away, the same words over and over. She kept saying he killed her and pointing at Philip who had curled into a ball on the floor. The security guards guided her toward the door with one on each side holding her arms. She twisted and fought against them the whole way. Her voice got louder as they got her into the hallway. We could still hear her shouting about her mother and demanding justice even after the door closed behind them. The administrators stayed in the room with us. One of them told us all to sit down and not move. More adults flooded in through the door. Some were teachers from other classrooms and others looked like office staff. They spread out around the room watching us. Gary Barnett walked in about 2 minutes later. He stood at the front of the classroom and looked at all of us. His face was serious but calm. He told us we would each be interviewed about what happened. He said to stay in our seats until called. Philip was still in the corner with his head buried in his hands. His shoulders moved up and down as he cried. A woman with curly hair walked in next. She went straight to Riley, who was still breathing funny and making little gasping sounds. The woman put her hand on Riley's back and spoke quietly to her. After a minute, she helped Riley stand up and walked her toward the door. They left together, heading for the nurse's office. The rest of us sat in complete silence. Nobody wanted to look at each other. The clock on the wall showed we had been trapped in here for over 2 hours. My legs were stiff from sitting on the floor. An administrator came to the door and called out the first name. Kenny got up and followed them into the hallway. 5 minutes later, they called Danica, then Ian. One by one, they took us out for our statements. Some kids came back to the room after and others didn't. When they called my name, I stood up on shaky legs. The hallway was full of people. Parents were there now, demanding to know what happened. Police officers stood near the main office. The administrator led me past all of them to a small room. Inside was the woman with curly hair who had helped Riley. She smiled at me and said her name was Alina LeBlanc. She asked me to sit down and tell her what I saw. I started to explain about Mrs. Osborne locking us in, but then stopped. I told her I needed to talk to someone privately first. She looked confused but nodded. She said we could talk in her office where it was more comfortable. We walked down another hallway to a door with her name on it. Inside were 2 chairs and a small couch. Pictures of mountains covered the walls. She sat in one chair and I took the other. I told her everything Philip had said to me about the dare from Eden, about the $20, about wanting to be cool, about how scared he was of going to jail. She listened without interrupting and wrote notes on a yellow pad. When I finished, she put down her pen. She explained that the police needed to know this right away. She picked up her phone and called someone. A minute later, Gary Barnett walked into the office. Alina told him to sit down and then asked me to to repeat what Philip had told me. I went through it all again, the dare and the money and everything. His face went from confused to shocked to pale. He rubbed his forehead with one hand. He stood up quickly and told someone outside the door to bring Philip to his office immediately. Then he looked at me and said I would need to talk to the police detective who was on the way. I sat in a plastic chair outside Gary's office for what felt like forever, my hands shaking as I pulled out my phone. I typed a message to my mom as fast as I could. The text just said there was an emergency at the school and Mrs. Osborne locked us in the classroom and the police were coming. My phone buzzed almost instantly with her reply saying she was leaving work right now and not to say anything to anyone without her there. I put my phone away and watched the chaos building in the hallway. More parents kept showing up, their faces all confused and angry as they demanded to know why their kids had been locked in a classroom. The secretary kept telling them to please wait and that Gary would explain everything soon. About an hour later, a woman in a dark suit walked through the main doors.